everybody, and welcome back to the second part of my Myth Dungeons playthrough. Let's start with correcting an error that I made at the end of the last video concerning those 6 crawlers here. They shouldn't have been placed at this unexplored edge, but rather on the newly explored tile. So we'll do this, we'll put those crawlers on the unexplored edge. In this case, we only have one unexplored edge on the newly revealed tile. So we'll place them here. That's because we weren't actually spawning monsters like you would usually do from a lair, but those crawlers were brought into play by an exploration roll, and in that case they are always placed on the newly revealed tile. So with that out of the way, we will continue our session. And for this playthrough, I will try to actually complete the quest successfully, hopefully. And for that, I will try to avoid any combat and just grab the remaining sewer meat tokens and run for it. Let's see if that will work out or not, but I'm pretty confident we can make it. So we are now in our second hero cycle, and the apprentice will use his remaining 2 movement points to move closer to the barrels. 1, 2. And preparing for the upcoming darkness cycle, he will play an illuminate, which costs 0 AP, and this will make it a bit tougher for those crawlers to actually hit him. The soldier will just move 1 square during this hero cycle. She doesn't have any enemies to attack within range, and unfortunately she doesn't have any move cards, so the only thing she can do is move 1 square. Remember that she's moving through water, so moving out of this water square and into the next square costs 2 movement points instead of 1. So not really much she can do, but she is already heading for this exit, hoping that the apprentice will be able to grab those last 3 sewer meat portions. This concludes our second hero cycle. We will now draw new cards for each hero. The apprentice will keep research, which will prove very useful when searching the barrels, because it will allow him to re-roll 1d10. And the soldier is hoping for a move card, perhaps a hustle, so she can get to the exit faster. Let's draw the new cards and then proceed to the refresh phase. Now we have 6 crawlers in the dungeon, and for that we now have to increase the AP by 1. All those crawlers belong to the same monster type, namely insects, so AP is raised by 1. And now we get to our third hero cycle. We will start with the soldier because her action is a bit boring. Although she got a hustle, she will just move out of the water for her 2 MP and then stop. You will see in a moment why that's a wise decision. The apprentice will move here, right, adjacent to all 3 barrels, and he will play a research, which unfortunately puts us at 6 AP and triggers our first darkness cycle. You may ask, why not search the barrels before the darkness cycle? The thing is, if he fails only at one of those barrels, we will have to explore a new tile, because the quest is only a success if you manage to get 6 or more Ceramid portions. So if he fails one of those rolls and doesn't have his research, we are into a lot of trouble, because we have to actually explore a new tile, and as we try to avoid combat, we will have a lot of enemies around, so we will try to play it smart. We'll see if that works out. AP has hit 6, so now we have to resolve our first darkness cycle in this in the dungeon. For that, we draw our darkness card, and before we will resolve that darkness card, the thing we have to do is we have to resolve a dungeon-specific darkness event. You can find this darkness event at the top of the exploration table on the back of the dungeon card. And the darkness event for the Sewers of Wagon's Cross tells us that at the start of each darkness cycle, we have to roll 1 fate die for each dark tile in play. So you remember, we were pretty lucky. We used 1 torch token here to turn this dark tile into a light tile. And the second tile we drew was already a light tile, so we don't have any dark tiles. This means we don't have to roll fate die for this darkness event. That's pretty nice, because if we had to roll fate die and we would roll a rage symbol, all minions would activate twice. As you might imagine, if you have a large dungeon and have a lot of dark tiles, this can get out of hand pretty quickly. So especially when you start playing dungeons for the first time, make sure you actually use those torches, because otherwise you might get swarmed pretty quickly. Then we just resolve the darkness card like in any other game of Myth. The first thing is the darkness event of the darkness card. And it tells us that for this activation we have to treat threat penalty as threat level 8. That's no problem. We haven't generated any threat up to now, so we don't have to worry. We also don't have to worry about the actual threat penalty. And now we are going to activate the monsters in the dungeon. And we'll start with the melee crawler that is closest to our apprentice, which is this one. And he will be the scout for his neighbor, pulling him with him. Important to note now is that enemies actually can't move through the spaces containing a realm object. I like to play it that way because it opens up more tactical possibilities. If you don't like this or think it's too complicated, you can just treat those spaces as regular spaces that can be entered by monsters. But as I said, I really like it that those crawlers have to go around those barrels and you can use them as a kind of cover. So let's move our crawlers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pulling this one with him. He will also go 1, 2, 3, 4. And this one will also move 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we have to treat our ranged crawlers. Those are all in range 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So they don't have to move. They are in perfect position to attack the apprentice. And they will do this. Those realm objects, they don't block line of sight. So those range crawlers can attack without any problem. And we will now resolve the 4 attacks that our apprentice has to suffer. This is from those 3 range crawlers here and from the 1 melee here. So I will roll 4d10 and remember that we have Illuminate in play, luckily, which raises the TN for each of those enemies by 1. But even though it's very bright on this tile, 1 crawler managed to get through. I rolled 110. Yeah, just show it to you. Luckily, the other rolls were failures. And so now I have to roll if our apprentice gets poisoned. And he'll suffer. Very, very unluckily, he suffers poison. So now we will lose 1 vitality and he'll get the poison status effect. One reason more to try to run for it, because we don't have any means of healing poison at the moment, so we should really get out of there. And the final step now for our darkness cycle is we have to bring in new enemies. Spawning works differently in the dungeon. I've explained the spawning rules correctly in the last video, but I will just do this again so you know what I'm talking about. To see how spawning works in the dungeon, you have to look at the quest card you're currently playing, and there you find the line with the little critter head, and there it tells you exactly how monsters spawn in the dungeon. It is important to note that in a dungeon you don't need a lair for monsters to spawn. Actually, most dungeons won't have lairs, so keep that in mind, that each and every darkness cycle you will get new monsters. That's very different from your normal myth games, and that's something you should always remember when playing a dungeon, because it's very, very easy to get swamped with monsters if you don't keep moving forward. So now we have to spawn, and unfortunately the darkness card we drew tells us that we have a deadly spawn. This means we have to spawn 2 captains. Where will this monster spawn? Those 2 captains will now actually spawn on this unexplored edge. Why? Because in contrast to when we did our exploration roll and had to place the monsters on the newly revealed tile, when spawning we check the whole dungeon for the unexplored edge that is closest to any hero. This is what the spawning rules tells us here on the quest card. So in this case, you'll see why I've left the soldier here and haven't moved her closer to the exit, because now the monsters will actually spawn on this unexplored edge, because it is the unexplored edge that is closest to any hero. The apprentice is 3 squares away from the unexplored edge, and the soldier is only 1 square away. So those 2 captains will spawn here, and we'll place them here, 1 and 2. This demonstrates quite nicely how you can control where new monsters spawn. I have to emphasize that this may not always be the best tactic, because as you can see, for the soldier it will be very hard to get rid of those 2 captains. I only did this because we were planning for just looting the barrels and running for it. So I was hoping that the apprentice wouldn't get swarmed and we just could spread out the monsters a little bit more. Okay, this concludes our first darkness cycle in the dungeon. We will now continue our current hero cycle with the apprentice, who has still 1 movement point left, and who will use that movement point to search the first of those 3 barrels. Luckily, he has a research in place, so if that roll should fail, he will be able to re-roll. To search that barrel, you remember you have to look at the corresponding realm object card, and it will tell us that we have to spend 1 movement point to roll 1d10, and everything from 4 to 12 is a success and will grant us another Zero-Mid potion. So let's roll, and we get a 2, which would normally be a failure, but we can use research to reroll. I will do that now. And barely we succeed with a 4, so this barrel gets discarded and we gain our 4th Zero-Mid portion. Yeah, this concludes this hero cycle, and we'll now check for sewer gas with the apprentice. Luckily, even though he has 2 ongoings, he didn't play any more cards. So in this case, he doesn't suffer any damage from the sewer gas. You remember that any filled action slot above the second would have caused him to suffer 1 damage, and being poisoned as he is at the moment, that would really been fatal. So we are entering now the deck phase, and we'll draw new cards for both heroes. The soldier will hold on to her hustle, and the apprentice is lucky as well, because he drew another hustle. So now he will suffer 1 damage from the poison, bringing him down to 4 vitality, and we will raise the AP 1 for the monster type insect that is present in the dungeon. Starting with the soldier again, she has faith in her fellow hero that he will make it out, and makes a run for it with 1 to movement points, and then playing her hustle for 1 AP to get to the exit. Note that if we look at the realm object card of exit, you see that just moving on the exit will not make you leave the dungeon. You actually have to spend 1 additional MP to trigger the exit and leave the dungeon. And our apprentice will use his 2 movement points to search those barrels. Again, he will spend 1 movement point to search that barrel, and he rolls a 10, so that's a success. The barrel gets removed, and we get our 5th sewer meat portion. And again, he will search that barrel. Unfortunately, he won't get the bonus from the fate token, because his fate token is arcane, and that's a rage one. And he will roll again, and he gets a 1. Luckily, this is a new hero cycle, so he can once again benefit from the research, giving him a 5, and being successful at his 6th search action, discarding the barrel and giving us another sewer mid portion. And now he will actually use his hustle for 1 MP to get the hell out of there. So he will move 1, 2, and this will finish the actual hero cycle. And again, we will draw new cards. The apprentice, he gets a meditate. So what he's going to do is he's going to move his 2 movement points, 1, 2, and use the meditate to restore 2 vitality. The soldier, now pretty confident the apprentice will make it out before the next hero cycle, will use one of her 2 movement points to leave the dungeon, and we will put her miniature off the tile to indicate that she has left the dungeon. It is important to note, if a hero uses an exit and leaves the dungeon, he won't be able to get back and help his friends. So when you leave the dungeon, make sure you're confident that the rest of the party will make it out, because once you leave, you won't be able to enter and help out. This concludes this hero cycle. The apprentice has to suffer 2 damage because the meditate occupies his 3rd action slot, and he'll suffer 1 damage from the poison and 1 damage from the sewer gas. So the 2 points he healed, he now loses again, but it's beneficial to him compared to not using the meditate, because then he would be at 3 vitality. Now he's at 4, and again we increase darkness by 1, and the apprentice will now just move 2 to the exit, skip to the next hero cycle, again suffering 1 damage, 1 loitering penalty because he wasn't able to generate any AP, and suffering another damage from the poison. But now he will be able, in the new hero cycle, he will be able to leave the dungeon, luckily, with 3 vitality. Now we look at the quest resolution step. What actually happens when you finish a dungeon quest? You remember, let's just take a look at the quest card. We turn it around to the front. And our task was to collect 6 or more sewer meat tokens. We managed to do this. We have 6 sewer meat tokens. And the quest said that we had to leave through an exit. We did this. You may ask, what other alternatives would there be? Let's just turn the card around to explain this. Each dungeon quest has a line. Each dungeon quest card has a special line on the bottom of the exploration table that gives a special flee penalty. What does fleeing actually mean? You at any time during a quest, a group of heroes can decide to flee a dungeon. For example, if you see that the situation is really dire and you're going to die, or you don't see any chance of completing the quest successfully, you can decide to flee. Fleeing is always done during the hero cycle. All the players have to agree to flee, and if you flee, you remove all the heroes from the board and the quest ends immediately. And each hero suffers the penalty listed on the quest card for fleeing. In this case, fleeing this quest would have each hero lose 3 vitality. So it's a pretty dire consequence, but it may be better than actually dying in the dungeon. Note, though, that in this particular case, as the quest instructed us to leave the dungeon via an exit, if we would have left the dungeon, we would have automatically failed the quest. So even though we had 6 sewer meat portions, we would still have failed the quest because we didn't leave via an exit. But everything is pretty okay. The apprentice is poisoned, but we managed to succeed at the quest and is barely escaped with those 6 sewer meat portions. So what we do now is we look at the green section of the quest card that tells us what reward we get. And in this case, we get 1 gold for each sewer meat token. Then we discard all the sewer meat counters. So this means we get 6 gold for those 6 tokens, and they get discarded. And now the quest is complete, but it won't be discarded, meaning this quest stays an active quest, and we could, if we wanted to, we could try again gain more sewer meat portions. Why? If you look at the front of the quest card and see this little symbol here, this means, and up here as well, this means that this quest can be repeated. Usually in Myth Dungeons, if a quest doesn't have this symbol, it's a one-shot. So you can attempt the quest, and no matter if you succeed or fail, you have to discard it afterward. The only exception for that are those quests that have this repeat symbol, and you can see the only way to actually discard this quest is to complete it with a bonus. So once we manage to gain 9 or more sewer meat tokens out of the dungeon, we will gain a bonus reward in addition to the gold for each sewer meat portion. And after resolving the bonus, this quest gets discarded. You will see that each dungeon quest is very specific when and what you have to discard. So usually it should be very clear when or what stays in play and what gets discarded. And if you look at the bonus, it says then discard this card. But we didn't get the bonus. We actually just made it out alive and got 6 gold. So we keep this as an active quest, and if we choose to, we can play this again. So this is completed and goes to our active quests. Now our heroes will return to the town of Wagon's Cross, and for that we bring back our location card. Now with the front of the location card, you might remember from the first video that I said that all those action and options you can see here are only interesting after completing a quest. So now we get a chance to level up, travel, trade, and rest before we embark on our next quest. And resolving a location card is pretty simple. All location cards work basically the same way. You start at the top, and the first thing you have to do after you completed a quest is you have to check if you unlocked any of those advancements. The first step is always advancements. For a dungeon location, the advancement is measured in reputation that you were able to obtain. Let's just bring back our quest card for a second. If you look at the bonus section here, if we would have been able to get 9 or more sewer meat portions out of the dungeon, we would have gained those bonus success, and this would have enabled us to gain 1 reputation, whereas the symbol or icon for that is this little star here. And if we would have had this reputation, we could have resolved our first advancement. You can see here, before the actual advancements, you have this little table here that tells you the requirement that you need to have to actually get the advancement. So for the party being able to keep 1 green item or gain 3 gold, you need 1, 2, 4, 6 or 8 reputation. And this works basically the same way for all the different location actions you see there. The front part always tells you the requirement you have to fulfill. As you can see, all the requirement is based on reputation in a dungeon location, and then it actually tells you what the action does. So unfortunately for our 2 heroes, no advancements because we haven't earned our first reputation. So we skip the advancements and go directly to travel. Travel would now allow us to go to another location. In the first dungeon pack you have 2 additional locations. You have River Falls, which would allow us to play a module act, and you have Camp Wakanda, where we could play adventure quests. It is always recommended that in this step you as well look at the options the other location cards provide, because depending on the needs of your party, it may be beneficial to travel to another location and use the trading or resting options there. Be aware though that if you travel to that other location, you also have to resolve a quest or module act there. So you can't just travel there, do the trading and the resting and return. No, if you travel to another location, you then have to do at least one adventure quest or module act there. So for this playthrough, our heroes decide to stay in Wagonscross, so they won't travel, which brings us to the third option, which is trading. Again, we look at the reputation requirements and we see with 0 reputation we could still purchase 3 torch tokens, 1 vitality potion, and we could get a random green merchant, although the prices from for buying from this merchant would be increased by 2 gold. The price for the torch token and vitality potion is given here. So buying 3 torches would be 3 gold, buying a vitality potion would be 4 gold. Although it is tempting to spend our 6 golds here, I won't do this, and I will explain in a second why. Because at the moment we have a big problem, and that problem is poison. Our apprentice is poisoned, and we don't have any option or means to get rid of that, which means when we play our next quest, no matter if it's a dungeon quest, a module act, or an adventure quest, he will still be poisoned and he will still be at 3 vitality, so he basically will die within the first 3 hero cycles, and yeah, we don't want this. So we look at our options for resting. There are 2 possibilities. There's a very cheap one that allows you to rest in the meadows outside the city gates. This will allow each hero to restore 2 vitality and reset AP, serendipity and threat. This sounds rather great, but we remember we have a poisoned apprentice, so while this option is tempting to save gold, it won't actually help the apprentice. So what we are going to do is we are going to rest in the juicy ham. And this option costs 6 gold, so yeah, we are very lucky to have this amount of gold. And it also states that everything is resetted. What this means is that we would actually set our heroes back exactly the same way they were when we started our adventure, so they would be at full health. They wouldn't suffer from any poison effects or status effects, but we would also lose all the equipment we have found in the dungeon or any other stuff we have gained up to that point in our adventure. Luckily, we didn't find any treasure in the dungeon because we just grabbed the sewer meat and made a run for it. So we won't lose any special items. The only thing we are going to lose are those 2 torch tokens. But even this isn't very bad, because when we try our second attempt at sewer meat, we will again get 3 torch tokens because we don't own any torch tokens. So in this case, the option I will definitely take is to rest at the inn. This will completely reset the game and allow us to do a second and hopefully more successful attempt at our sewer meat quest. Okay, this concludes my playthrough of Myth Dungeons. I'm sure I didn't cover everything that is in the mod. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I just wanted to give you an impression how the mod plays and how the game flow actually works. So let me know if you want to, or if you have any other question, and if you want to see more playthrough or more rule explanation, that's very helpful. Okay, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy with dungeons, and hope to see you soon. Thanks.